So tell me.
I don't,
All
Okay,
so
right.
we're ready to go.
how am I gonna know if I get the virtual hook?
You won't.
Yeah, just
right.
keep going.
So,
Okay,
Here we
so
go.
Raleigh, I think we're live.
Yep,
Hello.
you're live.
Hello, and Raleigh, happy Thursday.
wonderful. Here we are.
Um, and nice to see you, my favorite virtual friend, as you have told me. You told me that you have very few virtual favorite friends, so I am happy to be one of the singular one if you only have one favorite virtual friend.
No, I have a few, but I have a few. My I grew up in Maryland, so my grown children are still in Maryland, and
Mm-hmm.
my two youngest grandchildren, my two boys, are in Maryland. So it's even before the pandemic, it was pretty much a virtual relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I have a few virtual friends.
Okay. Well, how about we do a bit of an intro for folks that might be joining, and then we'll try to add in any questions through audience participation that I can see through the chat. So I'll share. Do you want to do an intro first, and then I'll do my intro second?
No, why don't you go first, Caroline?
Okay. Um, so my name is Caroline Bontia. I'm a local here in Healdsburg. I fell in love with Healdsburg, I think, for the very first time with my husband, Kevin Cody, who through a gift certificate, if you would believe it, a gift certificate to the Hotel Healdsburg back in 2007 as a wedding gift. And since that time, I think it just sort of planted the seed for, possibly even retiring here one day. We kept visiting from the Bay Area, from both Pleasanton and then Oakland as we kept moving, and it just continued to be a dream that kept being planted. And then in 2016, we ended up having the opportunity to buy a little cottage home, and started sort of falling in love with this place, even Healdsburg, even more. And I created Shop Local Healdsburg because during the time of the pandemic, I was really just, a concerned sort of local resident who had fallen in love with so much of the local businesses here, downtown bakery, Mr. Moon's, Shop Local Ish, Shop 377, Market 377, and all the wineries. And I think it was quite confusing to figure out what was sort of open for business at the time. And I sort of started taking stock of what was opened and sort of put together and curated a quick sort of small business directory. And then it sort of transpired into this sort of Q&A feature to sort of better understand how businesses were operating now during the time of COVID through a Q&A that I then featured and then posted through Shop Local Healdsburg. And I think the way I connected with you, Raleigh, in the Healdsburg Tribune is I noticed that one day as I was reading the Tribune that you had an open for business directory as well. And I sent you an email and I said, hey, thank you so much, first of all, for championing and talking about small businesses here that are sort of struggling and having issues and questioning their vitality. You had interviewed my friend Gary Johnson through Bailout, that's now Love Healdsburg. And I just wanted to thank you to sort of put this top of mind, because I came from a family that owned a family grocery store and takeout business when I was 5 to 15. And so I sort of personally have a visceral and personal memory of how that type of labor and love takes on a family and can change a community if it becomes a very successful business. And, within 2 days, I think, or within the week, you connected me, or your team reached out to me and say, hey, we'd like to partner with you. And I just wanted to say thank you so much to how incredible your team has been to just want to have a conversation to keep this going, in terms of what keeps our community connected. How are we thinking about these issues and what it means to be in it together? We're all in it together, but what does this mean? Um, and so again, I just wanted to thank you for your time, for allowing me to be your first Facebook Live moderator, interviewer. Um, And the fact that the Tribune too is sort of trying to also pivot and try to sort of connect even better with its users by embracing the online platform of Facebook Live. I mean, we just did a quick test about it yesterday with your team, and so just really curious to know more about you, how I can be a better local resident and a person that can better sort of champion this town and beyond. And I feel like you are probably one of the a great mentor to learn from, given your history and having owned the Healdsburg Tribune, founded in 1865, the fact that you've owned it for 20 years, and have so much history as a reporter. So I'd love to learn more about you. If you could share a little bit more of an insight about your background, and we can open it up for conversation with others wanting to jump in.
Sure. I can talk about me, but I'd rather talk about Healdsburg a little bit.
Sure.
And I'll come back to me if you want, if that's not too boring a subject. But shopping local, Healdsburg, anywhere, anybody's small town. I mean, that was never a question. It was just the essential thing you did, way back when. I mean, you didn't have the option to. I mean, if you needed a refrigerator or a big couch or some carpeting or whatever, Healdsburg might not have had a carpeting or store. They did have a great appliance store, even when I moved here in 81. But everything else was just assumed essential when you did it locally. The challenge for everyone now is it's not assumed. It's not de facto. Everyone has to do this intentionally. We have to shop locally intentionally. We don't know how important that is. Many of us don't know how important and vital that is to think hard about every dollar we spend. I mean, every dollar we spend on a transaction is as if we're voting on something. I mean, we're voting to support our community. The dollar we spend at Downtown Bakery, if we buy a loaf of the small Italian loaf that, in my household, we eat one or two a week versus something that's, in a cellophane package off the shelf at Safeway. You have to be top of mind, intentional about that. And the pandemic virus has just brought that to a brink where we've already seen it. I won't name the name, but another local business closed its doors today permanently, and there's been one or two a week. It's the onslaught of what we're facing, but we can counter that with with your efforts, Caroline. I mean, amazing effort that you're doing, and and bail out what they've done. The chamber and their economic recovery, and Will Seppi and Alan Baker over there, Will of Cousteau and Alan at Cartograph and others. The city's been helping. It's still not enough, though. We need to broaden the conversation. We need more of us to do it, and we have to move from what we assumed the local business was before into intentional. We have to move into very mindful shopping and mindful supporting of one another.
Do you think, I mean, I agree with that, but I also have to admit, I had to buy from Amazon. There were definitely moments where there are things that I couldn't buy locally. And I think that guilt sort of settled in quite deeply for me. And there's also general comfort right now with the pandemic, with whether or not people are comfortable with wanting to go to the store. So there's a lot of psychological sort of pieces to fit into this, but mostly I agree. I started feeling strongly that going outside and supporting the farmers market, for one thing, brought a sense of connection that sort of somehow sort of removed this fear of COVID. I don't know why. It just sort of maybe I'm just into this so deep right now that it just sort of ignited this like fire in me to say, hey, if I want to spend time and I want to use my time in a way that is about voting for something like you said, and if time is currency and currency is about spending what you care about the most, then I'm going to choose to use that to help my community is how I'm feeling now. Um, so um, so anyway, just wanted to also echo that that's sort of an interesting pivot that I've felt, even though I don't claim to be the most perfect local person. I really try these days because I do see the empty stores and it just sort of just affects me in a different way, and it puts a lot of fear in me in terms of what this community is going to be, right?
Yeah. We're one of thousands in the country of small communities and hometowns. They're, facing this economic upheaval that worsened by the pandemic, but was existing before that. I mean, the impacts of the internet on local ownership and local shopping was already very, very prevalent. I mean, the Sonoma County Economic Development Board in a study last year, not this would be 2018 Christmas season, they charted that $120 million of retail sales went online and out of the county that the year before would have fallen into local shops like Mr. Moon's, et cetera. That's $120 million. That's spread across, a few thousand local ownerships. That was the trend we were already facing, and and this is worsening it because what didn't shut down is the online shopping, and Amazon is making. The other day, Jeff Bezos made $1 billion 3 days ago. Personally, he made $1 billion. I mean, I read that in a report, I think out of the New York Times or somewhere, but, and meanwhile, Bella closed her doors on the Healdsburg Plaza. There's a direct connection to that. And we need to be cognizant and aware of that, I feel. And I think, Caroline, what you're doing and what the Tribune has always tried to do is, bring all of our local merchants together and the small businesses. Let's continue to figure out how we collaborate, co-promote, share messages. I mean, we did that during the wildfires, recovery and Sonoma Strong. We got through that, in a pretty good way. I mean, we need to do it again, but this time it's pretty deeper and longer. So the conversations need to go broader and different, purposeful. I think. I mean, I don't want to dwell on this topic. I want to have a broad conversation and see if we can engage other people in other topics. But so I'll just end this. Shopping local is essential. I mean, you can go out and buy services and goods for you can do it for me. And there's another way you can do it. You can do it for we. And we need to think we and not so much just about me, because the ultimate payoff is better for the we part of it.
We do have a question, an audience question that I just wanted to squeeze in here, if that's okay. What are some big local news stories that stand out in your mind looking back over your time at the Tribune?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I got here in 1981, and as I put up in the early Q&A that you did earlier for Caroline, it was still considered, Healdsburg was still considered the belt buckle of the prune belt. And they held an annual prune blossom festival every April. and it was always an agricultural town, but it was never a destination. It wasn't the heightened destination or world class entity that it is today.
Mhm.
But Healdsburg's always evolved. I mean, because if you go back to the 1870s, 1880s, Healdsburg was a resort destination along Fitch Mountain and the Russian River for people that came out of San Francisco, to
Mhm.
escape the heat or whatever, just to get out of town. So, Healdsburg's evolved over, a century and a half. Um, but just in the last 40 years that I witnessed, um, landmark stories obviously was the Rudat plan in '82, where the whole community came together in a large conference, and they were faced with three options to redevelop and reinvigorate their town. They could go to they could go big box and manufacturing, which
Mhm.
they could open up the Highway 101 interchanges and invite the big stores in and be a shopping mecca, or maybe get an auto dealers row facing 101.
Mhm.
um, they could hunker down and just stay small and not do anything, or they could invest their future in tourism and hospitality. And that was the one that Healdsburg chose. I mean, it was an open process, and the citizenry and the city leaders chose that path in 1982.
Mhm.
And we invested a lot. We created a redevelopment district downtown, and we did a tax assessment
Mhm.
on businesses, et cetera. When I in 1982 on the Healdsburg Plaza, half of the storefronts were vacant. There was one where next to let's see, where is next to Downtown Bakery, the winery tasting room right there,
Yep. Yep.
which is vacant right now.
The former
Yeah,
flight deck,
yeah,
which is now getting
former,
a
yeah.
new tasting room too. Yeah.
When 80 in '82, that there had been a fire there, and
Mhm.
what there had been there was a T-shirt shop. They sold T-shirts and baseball caps and stencil things and whatever. But there had
Mhm.
been a fire upstairs, so it was just smoky and vacant. It
Mhm.
stood like that for 2 years, and the redevelopment brought money in to do a facade improvement program and a little startup money, and the first couple of little eateries opened up.
Mhm.
There was where Flying Goat is. That was a live butchery shop. You know,
Mhm.
uh,
Hmm.
me and my wife Sarah, we love going in there once a week. Picking out the chicken we wanted chopped up and the special meat cut, etc.
Mhm.
You know, down where Valette is was Home Bakery. You know, but it gentrified a little bit, and there were mild improvements, and then maybe a decade later it kind of boomed a little bit, and the growth and the improvement kind of got beyond some of our expectations, and
Yeah.
some of us, former Mayor Carla Howe, who recently retired executive director of the Healdsburg Chamber of Commerce. She owned the children's store on the Plaza Cubby House, and she's famous for saying, because she was a participant through all of that, and she's famous for saying, "Careful what you wish for."
Mhm.
So the world discovered Healdsburg. That's what happened. I mean,
Yeah.
we were on the cover of Newsweek magazine in 1986, 88, I think. I still have it in my file cabinet here, and
Mhm.
there was no going back after that. And there's a lot of good about that, but there's some risks. So, I mean, to the question, what are you know telltale stories or landmark stories? Um, there's they're kind of trends. I mean, we didn't hit any, like, telling moment or striking thing or big incident. It's just been this kind of trend that's happened as Healdsburg's evolved. And
Mhm.
and I'll I pledged to myself I'd be really positive in this conversation, but I do have to evoke one question that I've asked people, and I've gotten different responses. And the question is Healdsburg still a hometown? Is it still a place where you can afford to raise a family and know that your next generation will find a place up the street, across town, and stay maintained? It's a question. Uh, I think it's a challenge and a focus. I think it was a key part of what 2 years ago the ESTAT forum did to look at that. How do we maintain that quality of life and those values we seek? Has Healdsburg become too precious? You know, um, so
Yeah.
it's an ongoing story. I couldn't point to specific chapters.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, that charm of what hometown feels is very Americana to me as an immigrant, um, because I grew up where my parents could just afford to live, and they were used to driving far to their work. So so I think it is quite special, but I guess there is a lot of I get it. There's a lot of interesting tension that I sense myself in terms of people that have second homes. Now, San Francisco folks that are thinking about also coming here now with the pandemic, thinking about what flexible work could look like, right? And yeah, I mean, I completely, I sense both sides and I get it. Um, but at the same time, I still feel like there's such still this hometown feeling of welcomeness that is so unique about this town. I can walk down the street and people say hello, you know, and that's special. I don't think you see that in any town that I've been in California. And I've lived in big. I guess this is the smallest town I've ever lived. I guess it depends what hometown means. I mean, hometown from 19 I don't know, I guess it's 2020. What does hometown mean? Is Hillsburg sort of like the last, is a small town a definition of 12,000 people or more? Like I don't know what that definition means actually. So share some sort of talking points here in terms of what has traditionally felt like a hometown, from both geographic as well as sort of historically from what you know and have been reporting on here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. This is all pre-pandemic, so let's start there.
Mm-hmm.
From a journalist point of view and a local community newspaper publisher's point of view, I've been watching our industry go through a radical change that's been happening for the last 3 to 5 years as our business model is just cratered and it's dead, and it was dying and dead before pandemic, but there's a bigger story there. Okay, so here's some hard statistics. So over the last 8 years in America, 2,000 community newspapers have died.
Mm-hmm.
2,000 communities have lost a Healdsburg Tribune, a newspaper dedicated to them. But that's not all they lost, and it wasn't what they lost first. A lot of those towns lost their hardware, their independent hardware store that had been in business for 90 to 100 years, or they lost the independent grocery store, or the shops along Main Street, and they lost them to the impacts of the internet and the convenience of online shopping. The newspapers lost the watering hole or the conversation point for the community to the spread out social media and the disruption of all of that. So those 2,000 communities, they didn't lose their local newspaper. they lost their touchstone. They lost their whole heart and soul with how to have a conversation. Um, it's been a challenge. We're in a cultural shift and a tipping point that was happening before that. Now let me get hopeful and positive about this. You know, Healdsburg is not a place where that absolutely should happen, and it won't happen. I mean, we are connected, Caroline.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying something positive?
Yeah.
Uplifting right now? Wait, can we have a drink social for a moment, please? Can we please
Sure.
sip our wine?
Well, sure. I'm having some Alley 6.
I told the Alley 6 folks.
Turn my mirror on, but that's fine.
And I'm drinking Cartograph. Alan and Serena,
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We love you guys.
Healdsburg,
Okay.
Healdsburg.
So back to your positivity. Lay it
Yeah.
on me, please. I need the positivity glow.
Healdsburg and the other communities that Sonoma West Publishers serves, Cloverdale, Windsor, West County, very connected, very self-defined, very engaged pre-pandemic, and we're struggling now. We know what we want to do, and we, like you, Caroline, you and us, we chose to be here. We want to be here. So, we have the grit and determination to make it happen. But there are, prevailing influences, technological influences that are fighting that all the way. I mean, they are anti-small town. I mean, Amazon doesn't care. The only reason they care about your zip code is that they can get a package to you faster than anybody else. I mean, they don't want to know anything else about you and your community than just what's the fastest way to ship something to you.
But can I just plug in that a lot of retailers in town will do free curbside drop-offs?
Right.
So just wanted to share that because it's actually better service than Amazon.
Right.
So FYI.
And we need to collaborate, and we need to build that tool.
Right.
We need to innovate around that, and
right.
It's not happening to the degree it should, and we could be doing it. So you're right. I mean, if people are using default Amazon or other not local formulas for that, it's again, it's you have to do informative efforts.
One thing I have observed is
I'm gonna have a sip.
Oh yeah, social. I also have another drink that I'm drinking that I didn't bring the bottle at my table is from Drink House. I just love their citrus, their ginger yuzu. Drink House is also a Healdsburg locally found aperitif company that I just really am fascinated by, and so that's also my second drink. So the one question I have for you, and I'm also now going to lead on to our next question after this, an audience question, is I do sense there's a lot of power in small, a small town. And when I say there's a power in sort of small numbers, I think that there is so much more connectedness and a mind shift that can happen when it's a smaller community, right? My husband Kevin and I lived in Oakland, and it's a different sort of set of dynamics and issues. It's a bigger city. I went to UCLA where there's a lot of students, like it's over 20,000 students versus maybe a private school that might have much more of a smaller number. And I grew up also in the 80s in a small town that I think is just as charming as Healdsburg in Cairns, Australia. And so when I think about the power of small, I see how Single Thread is partnering with the Sonoma Meal family meal, and they're also working with Corazon Healdsburg. Like, I see so much partnership, and I sort of see the same sort of messaging. Could you talk a little bit about the positivity that can happen and change that can happen quickly when there is sort of this smallness with Healdsburg being 12,000 people?
Yeah, well, trying to keep this positive. So
I was going to ask you that.
So for So for about 146 years, when the Healdsburg community wanted to know what was happening,
Mm-hmm.
and they, beyond just what the neighbor over the backyard fence or the merchant next door was doing, they read the local newspaper. That was where the community, Healdsburg, had a conversation with itself,
Mm-hmm.
and it was treated like gold. I mean, it was golden. I mean, the 40 plus owners of the Tribune that preceded me and my wife Sarah, uh, they all seemed to be pretty good people.
Mm-hmm.
They were mostly men. I think actually they were all, no, there were two women owners. I'm sorry. In the 70s and 80s, there were two female owners of the
Yay.
Tribune.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone else seems to have been a man. But they seemed to be pretty reputable journalists. So, the reputation of, if I want to get it straight, if I want to know what Healdsburg's really about, then I pick up the Tribune and I read it. You're asking me questions about getting connected and staying connected. Um, that's not the case anymore. I mean, the Healdsburg Tribune still has the biggest readership audience and eyeballs in the community. I mean, we have, Catherine can tell me how many Facebook friends we have. It's over 4,000.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And then we have our subscriber base, and then our website. I just pulled up the statistics today for someone. So in the last 28 days, we had 80,000 unique visitors to the website.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have an essential audience there, but those folks are scattered everywhere else. So, Single Thread and the others you mentioned, they have their own constituencies, etc. But we're kind of splintered and spread out. The more we can, share that message and continue the Healdsburg conversation, Caroline, like you and I are doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the more we can have this essential conversation about, if the element would only be this. I mean, if we wanted to pick this up next week and do it again, and we said, okay, so it's me and Caroline this week.
Mm-hmm.
Let's continue the conversation next week, and let's have a few more people. Alan at Cartograph,
Yep.
Will at Cousteau, whoever else is on this call tonight,
Mm-hmm.
and continue how to share that essential conversation. That's a Healdsburg conversation. I mean, I think we have one issue to decide. I think we have one problem to solve in Healdsburg. I think it's one problem.
Just one problem.
Yes.
Is this your optimistic side, defining it as one problem? Okay.
Well, a problem's not optimistic. A problem is a
but the fact that you're just sort of, well, okay. If it's just one, I'm ready. I'm totally ready for it.
Healdsburg needs to figure out how to be totally inclusive for everyone and stop being exclusive to some.
Okay.
Economically, socially, I mean, we hear about this, this theme of equity, etc.
Yep.
If you want, and I'll go back to something I said several minutes ago, if Healdsburg wants to be a hometown instead of just a place to land or a place to visit, if it wants to be a hometown, it needs to be inclusive. It needs to have places for its workers to live and work.
Right.
It needs to have a hope for the next generation. It needs to have adequately funded community institutions. Our schools need to be supported. We need to do the right programming there that teaches equity and diversity. It's all of those things, but I would give you the equation of there's two ways to go: inclusive or continue the exclusive. And some of that comes around with land use policies and zonings,
Mhm.
you know, how much tourism and how much you want that to be like, because, you know, the more high end you do, the more you accommodate that, then you're going to exclude the capacity and ability to provide for worker housing, et cetera. So that's
Yeah.
the bargain and the challenge. You know, and I don't wake up every day and think about that, but I do remind myself every week about Raleigh. What are you doing to help make Healdsburg more inclusive and less exclusive?
Right.
We're you know we published our first Spanish language letters to the editor a few weeks ago. You know, we're working on our first bilingual publication, Living Well, that we
Right.
hope to bring out very soon.
Mhm.
And I want to do, and we've partnered with Corazon and Locien and others, um, and the Latinx communities in the schools that are school based. Um,
Mhm.
you know, the Tribune is totally open to being inclusive. You know,
Mhm.
I'm ready. You know, we've printed stuff in my newspaper that I haven't understood or endorsed or even gotten my head around, and that was all printed in English,
Mhm.
and you know, and even I didn't understand it. Well, I'm ready to put it in Spanish. And I won't get it. Someone will tell me, yeah, no, that's the facts. That's accurate, Raleigh. Go ahead and
Mhm.
print it, and I'm ready to print it.
Yeah. I think that segues really well into our next audience question from Michael Cody, who happens, by the way, to be my father in law and has been here at Healdsburg. He stayed with us. He's actually someone that I keep thinking, oh my gosh, if you had a beer or a drink with him, he'd be an incredible conversationalist like you.
Here you go, Michael.
Hey, hey! So my father-in-law Michael said, "How can working families afford to live in their supposed hometown?" And maybe this is where that other question about inclusivity and zoning and things of that nature came. He, by the way, is a staunch like local paper person too. He reads the local paper and print every day as well. But his follow-up question is that he lives in Philadelphia suburbs, and Philadelphia Inquirers is struggling as well, right? How can the Tribune survive in this environment of instant news gratification and online BS? I mean, this is my father-in-law. I love him.
Yeah.
That's why I also think that talking to you is almost golden in terms of like the type of advice that I seek from him and from you. But can you share that? I mean,
Yeah.
there's What's Happening Healdsburg, right? So, and
Yeah.
there's a ton of subscribers there and a lot of interesting trigger points that comes from just the noise. And I
Yeah.
don't necessarily, and it's funny how numbers might drive the popularity, but it doesn't drive substance. So I would love to really hear your thoughts on on Michael Cody's question.
Yeah. So that's interesting. The Philadelphia Inquirer is owned by a nonprofit institute,
Hmm.
the Lenfest Institute. So they have a new ownership, a new business model, which is exactly what the Healdsburg Tribune is doing. I mean, we created the Sonoma County Local News Initiative, a nonprofit organization that eventually will take over ownership of the newspapers that Sonoma West Publishers owns, to assure that there will be community ownership and community buy-in going forward. That's the new business model. So there's a tie-in back to Philadelphia. Um, you know, what you need to do, what has to happen is um, the past 100+ years of newspaper business model just needs to be discarded and thrown away. I mean, it was a cruel joke and a fake model. You know, American newspapers, market driven, commercially based, derived all their revenue from selling ads for beer, cigarettes, cars. You know, the car dealers and cigarette manufacturers, you know, couldn't care less about preserving democracy or, supporting a good conversation among the community. We got away with it because we were the monolith of the entity in town. And that's not the case anymore. The community newspapers have to be considered, declared, and accepted as an essential community institution. Just like the high school, the library, the museum, or the hospital. And, all of those that I just mentioned get public tax money to keep their doors open. And newspapers and journalism doesn't. And I'm not saying that we need a newspaper tax. I'm not saying that at all. But the communities need to understand that, the commercial model of being advertising based is gone and dead. And readers and the community needs to support the local newspaper. What's happening in Healdsburg, next door, Facebook groups can't replace what the Healdsburg Tribune does. The Healdsburg Tribune employs journalists, professional, ethically trained journalists that tell it like it is. They fact check it. They're dogged. I'm looking at Catherine on my screen. She's monitoring this. We stay up to the end of every city council meeting. We attend every school board meeting. We read every environmental impact report. We go through reams, and I did two. I don't want to scoop myself, but I'm working on 2 stories right now on cannabis grow operations that are proposed in our region that neighborhoods don't even know about because the application just got filed. So I've been digging on that. All of that goes away when paid journalists go away. So that's the bargain that we have to support in a new way, because the advertising support, because of the wrecked model, the destroyed model of how the bargain of advertising is that transactional relationship is gone now, thanks to internet. I mean, I was on a California News Publishers Association conference just before I got on here, and a woman from the Knight Foundation of Journalism, Jennifer Preston, let us know that 80%, I'm looking at my notes here, I'm looking down, 80% of all digital ad revenue ends up in 2 zip codes. Yeah. Menlo Park and somewhere else in Silicon Valley, wherever Facebook and Google where you mail all the checks in. 80% of digital revenue goes to those 2 mailboxes. Last year, newspapers lost $13.6 billion of revenue they used to get from advertising.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you did say the old model is dead, right? So what is a proposal, or what are some steps that we could propose to the city to maybe consider the local newspaper or local news as sort of like a utility, right?
Yeah, I think, Caroline, I think efforts like Shop Local Healdsburg and what you're doing, co-promotion, cooperative marketing, and just the the more philanthropic effort to we have a great healthcare foundation of North Sonoma County. We have Healdsburg Education Foundation. The Healdsburg Museum is pretty well endowed. Center for the Arts is struggling a little bit.
Yeah.
You need to put right there in that echelon. We as a community, and I'm awkward to say this because I'm an owner right now.
Right.
But we need to put the Healdsburg Tribune right there as a community institution. And understand that my wife Sarah and I benefit nothing from that financially, because we've already pledged everything over to the nonprofit we've already created. But that's the winning model. Local news has to be considered a community institution. Um, it's a model that's emerging, you know, in places, those 2,000 communities that lost their newspaper. You know, there are places where that kind of model is emerging to replace that. Um, yeah, it's where we think we need to go. It's the path I've derived for us to head to, and you know, and a lot of the base is, you know, local businesses banding together to support one another. I mean, the newspaper is a little different because we are an institution. We're looked upon. You know, do I have a little segue here? Do you know how I know we're an institution and not just another little local business? So we'll get people that send us press releases, you know, organizations, individuals, even commercial businesses, and you know, they send them to us and they expect us to print them or publicize them, and we don't have space or the effort, resources to do all of them, and that's okay. um, you know, and some people, you know, get disappointed that we didn't do it, but a lot of the time people call me up or come into the office and go, how dare you not print my press release? How dare you not tell my story? How dare you, you know, eliminate me? And it's like, oh, well, you know, we're you know, I'm just a little local company just like you. You know, I didn't have the space, I didn't have someone to assign to it, and it's like, you know, we're it's not like a request. I mean, we're demanded to do that. We're, you know, it's like this. It's like telling the city council or the police. It's like telling the police, you know, I called 911 and you didn't show up. God damn it, where were you? And it's like we get, the Tribune gets 911 calls. I mean, why didn't you show up and print my press release? Let's go. Whoa, wait a minute. You know, we're a for-profit company. We're trying to cover our payroll. So that lets us know. I mean, we have a huge demand, but we've been lacking the support. I mean, not just the Tribune. I mean, newspapers that have failed and died and are struggling. You know, there's been a disconnect, and you know, the industry itself is equally responsible as the community, because everyone has struggles.
Can you share to how the Healdsburg Tribune might interact with? I mean, there's competition, right? There's the Press Democrat that we all are aware of. I also see the Healdsburg Patch. Like, how do I, as a local resident, I mean, because I know you and I have a connection with you and your team, and I live in Healdsburg. To me, Healdsburg Tribune is one news that I subscribe to, and I'm a paid subscriber. I also subscribe to New York Times. But can you share with us how we, as a local community too, should think about, well, how do you partner and think about inclusivity, or as a for-profit organization, right? The Press Democrat, the Hillsburg Patch, and also San Francisco Chronicle. I mean, it's news, right? Everyone has access to the internet. How do we, if we only have such limited budget to spend and donate to a particular news that's local, why Healdsburg Tribune?
Yeah.
I already am sold, but
No,
I do want to have this conversation just generally for others who are on, you know, on the edge of not knowing why the Tribune.
Oh, a few things. First of all, Sonoma Publishers is a trendsetter in the newspaper industry. I mean, we're a model that's being followed right now as we convert to nonprofit status and organization. And as 2 years ago, we did our direct public offer, and we had 147 investors invest $400,000 in our efforts. And every day we get checks in the mail from people that are donating a little extra money on top of their monthly subscriptions to us. So we have a good future model that can demonstrate and prove sustainable journalism. the other factor there is we still present an essential voice to the community that can't be replaced. I mean, journalism is, Facebook, Google, etc. They're not journalism outlets. So there's still a singular role there that a community, a community, a community requires and needs to be, defined as a community.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my third point there.
Okay.
It was pretty big, though. It was a big one. And I think it was positive too. And
oh, darn it. We lost it. You know what? You got to drink your whiskey rye right now, and maybe we'll come back.
It's mostly ice now, but that's fine.
Well, okay. I mean, we'll come back to that thought. But
what was the previous question? Help squeeze that out of me. I think I was a big deal there.
I think I was just asking a question of how does the Tribune distinguish itself from the Press Democrat and the Healdsburg Patch?
For anybody listening in, classical journalism, followed the 5 W's, the who, what, when, where, and why, and then the one that wasn't a W, how. And I've been in the business 40, 46, 48 years. I forget how long. And I was trained the hard-boiled way to follow that. Get it straight, get it quick, get it first, and rip it and move on. But there's a new journalism, and I've totally adapted, bought into this, and I'm faithful and fervent about it. And it's not the 5 W's, it's the 5 C's. And this is what I've been practicing, and my news team practices it. And the 5 C's are, provide context. Only journalists can do that. What happened before? What's happening now? What might happen next? That's the context. Social media is too fast and quick and instant to capture that. You need a journalist to do that. So context is the first C. The second one is conversation. News isn't something you put on a stone tablet. It's something you have a give and take about. I mean, a journalist doesn't know everything. The top quality of being a journalist is, the top skill is knowing how to ask the best question. Ask best questions. Have the conversation. So the second C is conversation. And the third one, which is super important right now in this time and age, is curation. We need filtering and editing. I'm sorry that we're just onslaught with way too much information. Somebody's got to filter that down, and that's a journalist's job. And community, when we followed and reported on the rallies and demonstrations in the town squares and the plazas around police brutality, etc., Black Lives Matter, we weren't up on a pedestal. We didn't stand aside. We were right there, engaging with all the voices. We collected as many voices as we could, and that's community. And the other part of community is, we're open to every effort that Corazon and all the organizations, want to share their information. So community. And then the fifth C that's very important is collaboration. And there's a new wrinkle there because, journalism and newspapers in the past used to position themselves as being very, very aloof, and like we're objective and we're sacred and you can't touch us. And that's wrong. We need to collaborate going forward. And that this is all pre-pandemic stuff, but emphasized and more urgent now. to get through this in the most positive way, we have to open up to as much collaboration as we possibly can. And journalists, from their unique vantage point, have a very important role to play in community leadership. I don't shy away from that. My investment here in the community for 39 years, I'm not going to waste away or shy away from. I mean, if I see something good, I'm going to go right on, Caroline, let's keep doing this, as I've done. And if I see something that stinks, and if I can do a sharp editorial moment going out the door, I mean, the way we chased Leah Gold out of office stinked. I mean, we should have Ozzy and her on the board right now. We should have both of them there. We could have figured that out. We could have done that, and so I'm just squeaking in a little leadership voice in there. With that, I'll shut up.
Well, Catherine's telling us that we have less than 5 minutes, but I feel like we could keep going, and I hope that is what the intent is for future conversations. This is sort of just a first primer. I hope you continue to have more conversation with other locals, other businesses on this topic. I hope to champion and continue to have conversations in the background and collaborate with your team. But one last question, maybe while we have like a couple more minutes, is given sort of the history you have with the Tribune, what kind of legacy would you like to continue to lead, right? You talked a little bit about you might be the last owner.
Yeah.
Which puts a little sad tone, and I know you're trying to not be negative, but you seem such a pragmatist and realist. But what kind of legacy would you like to be remembered by through your efforts? I mean, I have my own observation of what that is, but if you could share what that is or your wish.
Yeah, I think I am going to be, me and my wife, Sarah, we are going to be the last owners of the Healdsburg Tribune. But the legacy is we're going to evolve this and transform this into the next model of how the community continues its conversations with itself. I do not think it should exist or can exist on social media where the platforms are based on manipulation and stealing your privacy and not local. Facebook, Google, Twitter, etc. Those aren't good for Healdsburg. They're not. I mean, they're fast and immediate and they have a broad audience, but they don't consider Healdsburg at all. So my legacy would be to bring us to a transformation where, we get to the next model, the next structure where Healdsburg continues to have a very reliable, trustworthy, and safe conversation among itself. And we have a lot of tools, we have a lot of interest, a lot of community interest, a lot of involvement. Caroline, you, and many others, where we can make that happen. And there's a willingness on the part of me and Sarah and the Tribune to support that and make it happen. I mean, there are communities where this isn't happening because the owners of legacy newspapers are just cutting their losses and just walking away. And we're not here to do that. We want to carry that on. So it's hopeful, and I think just in any end moment is we should continue to have a conversation about how we have the conversation. We should talk about how to have a purposeful conversation. I'm happy to do this every week.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much. And I've found you to be super collaborative, and your team. I thank you for your time, and I definitely champion you as we sort of see how these conversations evolve. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Likewise.
Have a good night.
All right.
Cheers.
Thanks. Yeah.